Hello everyone, I'm Saber Moshirian and you are listening to episode 4 of the Failure Chronicles. In the first season of Failure Chronicles, between episodes where we explore books about failure, I also like to pause for reflection, moments to look back at how great minds of the past understood life, success, and the human struggle itself. Today's episode is the first of those reflections, and for this one, I've chosen a man who was not only a genius, but also a deeply human soul. Someone whose thoughts still echo across 1,000 years. I'm talking about Omar Khayyam. In the next episode, we will imagine sitting down with him for an interview. But before that, let's travel back in time to the world he lived in and the journey that shaped his ideas. Khayyam was born around 1048 CE in Nishapur or Nishapur in northeastern Iran, almost a millennium ago. It was a fortunate time for a child with a curious mind. The ruler of the land admired science, art, and literature. His father was a man of learning, and Nishapur or Nishapur itself was a great center of knowledge in the Islamic world. At that time in Iran was part of the Abbasid Caliphate or Khalifa. The local kings ruled under the shadow of the Caliphate in Baghdad. The Seljuk Turks, powerful Sunni rulers from north of the Caspian Sea, controlled much of the Islamic world. And it was during the reign of Sultan Alp Arsalan that Khayyam was born. From childhood, Khayyam showed an extraordinary gift for learning. He studied Islamic sciences first, then turned to mathematics and astronomy, where his brilliance quickly became clear. By his early 30s, around 1070 CE, he left Nishapur and traveled to Baghdad, the beating heart of the Caliphate, city alive with scholars, poets, and scientists. There, he continued his studies and met the great thinkers of his time. Some believed he even crossed paths with Avicenna, Ibn Sina, though history remains silent on the details. By the way, Khayyam never chased fame. He was quiet, solitary, devoted to thought. But talent has a way for revealing itself. Soon, one of the most powerful men of his era, Nizam al-Mulk, the wise vizier or wise hand of Sultan Malik Shah, recognized Khayyam's genius and invited him to the royal court in Isfahan, in Iran. There, Khayyam entered what would become the golden chapter of his life. Isfahan was turning into a hub of art and science. Sultan Malik Shah loved learning and gathered the greatest minds of the area around him. Under his patronage, Khayyam helped reform the solar calendar, creating the Jalali Calendar, one of the most accurate in history, and still admired for its precision today. He also worked on founding observatories in Isfahan and Marv, and wrote several philosophical treatises. This era, the reign of Malik Shah, is remembered as a golden age for Persian literature and science, a time of peace, intellect, and creation. But peace, as always, is fragile. In 1071 CE, the Seljuks won the Battle of Manzikert against the Byzantine Empire, a victory that expanded Muslim lands but also left deep marks on the spirits of the time. And years later, after Sultan Malik Shah's sudden death around 1100 CE, everything changed. The new ruler, Sultan Sanjar, was stricter, more religious, and far less interested in science or philosophy. Political unrest grew, and many scholars left the court. Khayyam, now famous but weary, chose to return home to Nishapur, the city where his story began. It was there, in solitude, that he turned more deeply toward poetry and philosophy, crafting the timeless Rubaiyat, those short, reflective quatrains that would one day carry his name across the world. Mr. Khayyam never married, never sought power or wealth. He lived quietly, thinking, writing, gazing at the stars, and in 1131 CE he passed away in Nishapur, buried, as he wished, beneath apple and pear trees, where blossoms would fall gently upon his grave each spring. When it comes to Omar Khayyam's life, written records are scarce. The first reason, as I mentioned before, is that Khayyam never sought fame. He lived quietly, avoided politics, and even refused an offer from Nizam al-Mulk, the hand of the king, to govern his hometown, Nishapur. He never documented his own life, and he didn't want others to either. The second reason is that in those times, poetry was mostly passed on orally. People memorized verses instead of writing them down, and later, when the Mongols invaded Iran in the 30th century, they destroyed countless libraries, including those in Nishapur and Baghdad. If any detailed records of Khayyam's life had existed, they were likely lost in the storm of fire and war. This lack of evidence opened the door for legends. One famous story claims that Khayyam, Nizam al-Mulk, and Hassan Sabbah, a terrorist, were childhood friends who made a pact to help each other rise to power. But history proves this impossible, since Hassan Sabbah was born after Khayyam. There are also tales about Khayyam's friendship with Avicenna, or Ibn Sina, though there is no proof they never met still, since both explored the same deep questions about nature, ethics, and the human soul. It is not hard to imagine them in conversation. Khayyam left behind several scientific works on mathematics, astronomy, and geometry, and a few philosophical essays. But his Rubaiyat, the short quatrains filled with thoughts and doubt and wonder, were never written down by him. There are reasons for that. In his time, recording poetry was not common. More importantly, Khayyam's ideas, his questioning of faith, religion, and the meaning of life, were controversial. In a deeply religious Sunni society, some clerics even accused him of heresy, though there is no strong evidence for that. Khayyam verses were open to interpretation. Every reader could find a different truth in them. Perhaps Khayyam were wise enough to see the danger, decided not to publish them during his lifetime. Centuries later, Sadiq Hidayat, one of the first modern Iranian writers to study Khayyam, wrote, Khayyam's songs were hidden during his life, known only to a few close friends. Some of his quatrains survived in the margins of books, written down here and there by people of taste, and only after his death were they gathered and shared. The first written collection of Rubaiyat appeared 3 centuries after Khayyam's death, in Shiraz, in Iran, in the south of Iran, compiled by an unknown scribe. That manuscript, later called the Bodleian manuscript, ended up in the Bodleian Library at Cambridge University after being bought in 18th century by Sir Gore Ouseley, the British ambassador to Iran. For nearly 600 years, Khayyam's poetry remained mostly ignored in Iran. But once his Rubaiyat reached England, everything changed. At Cambridge, an Orientalist translated one of his quatrains into English. Another scholar, Edward Byles Cowell, found it, translated more, and shared them with his friend Edward Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald spent almost 20 years completing a full translation published in 1859, and that book made Khayyam world famous. 2 well-known English poets discovered a copy in a London bookstall and were captivated. Their enthusiasm helps spread Khayyam's fame, leading to creation of the Omar Khayyam Club of London in 1882, and later another in America. More translations followed in French, German, Italian, and Russian, turning Khayyam into a global literary icon. Yet, there is a challenge, because the original manuscript never existed in Khayyam's own hand. Later, scribes often added verses of their own or changed his word to make him sound more mystical, more like a Sufi. Sadiq Hidayat once said, if someone had lived 100 years and changed their beliefs twice a day, even then they could not have written such conflicting thoughts. Some poets even signed their own quatrains with Khayyam's name to escape religious persecution. Others simply limited his style, and over time their verses merged with his. Modern scholars like Sadiq Hidayat and Muhammad Ali Furughi later tried to separate the authentic from the false, producing what are now considered the most reliable editions of the Rubaiyat. Understanding this history helps us grasp something deeper. Khayyam lived in a complex world, rich in science and faith, yet bound by dogma. And within that world, he dared to ask questions about life, death, meaning, and destiny. Questions that still speak to us today. Many believe that his ideas quietly influenced the birth of modern philosophy, even the roots of nihilism in the West. Some claim that Friedrich Nietzsche himself drew inspiration from Khayyam's thought. But could a Muslim scientist truly be the father of nihilism? We will never know for sure. Khayyam is not here to answer. Only his verses remain, whispering across time. Many influences shaped Khayyam's thinking. Some say he was inspired by Greek philosophy, like Aristotle and Epicurus. Others note Islamic law and theology and the culture of his time, when the Islamic world balanced between mystical and philosophical thought. This tension, some believe, strengthened Khayyam's creativity. Some scholars think Khayyam also knew Indian literature and philosophy. Most importantly, as a mathematician, he connected science and philosophy deeply. His logic and analytical thinking show clearly in both his studies and his poetry. It is also suggested that because Nishapur was once a center of Zoroastrian faith, his family may have had Zoroastrian roots, and above all, the philosopher Avicenna, Ibn Sina, left a lasting mark. Khayyam often called himself Avicenna's student and referenced his ideas in his writings. Let's take a look at Khayyam's Rubaiyat. His quatrains reveal his philosophy beautifully. One key theme is fate and free will. Another is the fleeting nature of life. He reminds us that life is short and moments pass quickly. So we must enjoy the present. He says, alas, the pages of youth are all turned. The spring of life has quietly burned. The bird of joy called youth has flown. I do not know when it came nor when it returned. Another theme is living with joy and making the most of the moment. Khayyam tells us not to worry too much about problems or future troubles, but to enjoy life. He says, this caravan of life moves strangely fast. Cherish the hour before the night has passed. Why worry for tomorrow's grief, my friend? Bring wine, the night will soon descend. He also encourages doubt and questioning. For Khayyam, seeking truth is important. He asks us to do not accept beliefs blindly. And of course, love and death was important for him. He asks us to see death as natural and fleeting, a part of life. In a quatrain, he says, drink, for the heavens plot our fall. the earth shall bloom again from me, and you blow. Sit by the grass, raise the cup, and see, tomorrow's green will rise from you and me. That's it for today. You can listen to an imagined dialogue with Khayyam himself in the next episode. Using artificial intelligence, I asked two AI models, ChatGPT and Gemini, to study Khayyam's philosophy. Then I asked them to become Khayyam, and I played the role of his student, asking questions. You can listen to that in the coming episode. Thank you for listening to this episode of Failure Chronicles. You can follow the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and other platforms. Until next time, farewell.